Terry Barber is a best-selling author and founder of Lighthouse Catholic Media. Jesse Romero is a retired law enforcement officer, a former kickboxing champion with a master's degree in theology. And together, they share a passion for evangelization and PhDs in common sense. You're listening to The Terry and Jesse Show on Immaculate Heart Radio. To join the show, call 888-914-9149. Here's Terry and Jesse.
This is Terry Barber. Jesse Romero's out of town today. He'll be back tomorrow morning. We're going to be covering for Patrick Madrid between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m., and I've got a special guest at 7. I'm going to have a priest on from a local parish in L.A. who since 2008 have saved over 1,100 babies through pro-life works. You're going to not want to miss that. Today I have a very, very special guest. Very special. His name is Father Donald Calloway. We're trying to get him on the phone right now because he's going to talk about his book, Champions of the Rosary. As you know, this is the 100th anniversary of Fatima. I've been beating up on Fatima, telling everybody to pray their daily rosary and implement the peace plan of Our Lady of Fatima. It's so important. Before I get Father Don on the air, I just want to remind all of the listeners in California, very important to call Governor Jerry Brown to stop a bill that's going to help fund abortion. We don't want that. So I want you to call 916-445-2841. Why don't you really tell me what you think, Terry? Yes, killing unborn babies is unacceptable, Mr. Governor. Call him and tell him that. 916-445-2841 in a very polite manner. But today, my special guest is Father Donald Calloway. He wrote a wonderful book called Champions of the Rosary. Again, to contact Father, you just go to Father, spell out Father, Calloway.com to find out all kinds of good things about this man's work. I've known Father since he was newly ordained. I did his video called No Turning Back, and he has been a gem in the church. Father Don Calloway, welcome to the Terry and Jesse Show.
Hey, Terry, how are you?
I'm too blessed to be stressed, Father, too anointed to be disappointed, and if hope was money, I'd be a billionaire, my friend. Father Don, I love having you on our show because you're a priest who loves Jesus and Mary and the church, and you've been going all over the world proclaiming the teachings of Christ, especially his Blessed Mother's message of Fatima and the Rosary, and you wrote a wonderful book called The Champions of the Rosary. But before we get into that book, for the very few people who don't know who the heck you are, can you just introduce yourself and tell us that, you weren't a Catholic, you're a convert, but set the stage on how Our Lady worked in your life first.
Yeah, absolutely. So growing up, I was raised in a very tumultuous household. My parents were not Christians. They were not anything. They didn't believe in God. They didn't have any foundation. And my mother was actually married 3 times before I was 10 years old. And my youth was just all messed up. And then my third father was a military officer, so we moved to Japan, and I had no foundation. It went from bad to worse for me. I started, doing drugs. I started, living a very immoral life. And I got kicked out of Japan when I was only 15 years old. Came back to the States, and I dropped out of high school. I got thrown in 2 drug and alcohol rehabilitation centers in Pennsylvania. I went to jail as soon as I turned 18. And it was just a wreck. But through all that craziness, and, I had long hair down to my waist, and, I looked like, I came from another planet, and through all that craziness, my parents, they had a huge conversion. They went and talked to a Catholic priest, and they just got rocked by God, fell in love with Jesus Christ, with the Virgin Mary, with the Catholic Church, became Catholic. And I thought they were nuts. I was like, man, what are they doing? These people are nuts. They're crazy. Who does this? And I didn't realize that it would be almost 3 years after they had their conversion when I was at my rock bottom. And I was at the bottom of the barrel. I didn't even want to live anymore, And I went out, and one time I'm passing through town because I hardly even stayed at their house, and I picked up a book that they had on the bookshelf about the Virgin Mary. And man, I had never heard anything like that. I wasn't even sure what it was.
Yeah.
And it floored me. It just floored me. And I read the book, and I went and talked to a Catholic priest, and things just snowballed from there, man. I just fell madly in love with Jesus Christ and with the Catholic Church and with the saints and all that good stuff. And Yeah, and I've actually this year,
Yes.
I'm celebrating being a Catholic for 25 years. So
Unbelievable.
that's amazing.
Father Don, I've got your conversion story called No Turning Back on video or audio. If people want to hear the whole story, it's free. You just call 877-526-2151. Father Don, you wrote a book that I'm stoked about. I am so excited. This is the best book on the Rosary that's ever been compiled. I know you've got page after page of endorsements on the book. It's called Champions of the Rosary, and people can get it from Father's website, fathercalloway.com. Father, why did you write this book about the Rosary and the history of the Rosary? What motivated you to do this?
Well, really, I mean, it was my own love for the Rosary, because when I had my conversion experience, you know, I went to a Catholic church, and the first thing I ever saw when I walked to a Catholic church was 5 little Filipino women sitting in the front doing something. I didn't even know what they were doing, man, you know. And it looked to me like they had a necklace in their hands, and they were looking up at the ceiling, like saying something. I was clueless. But I found out that they were praying the Rosary. And as I started to go to church, I was like, man, this sounds awesome, and what they're doing. And so I learned about it. And ever since then, I mean, the Rosary helped me to discern my vocation to the priesthood. It helped me to put holy images in my mind and in my heart, in my thinking. It's everywhere I go. It's always in my pocket. And you know, I've been a priest for almost 15 years now, and I love it. And so I said, you know what? The world is so messed up right now that we need to get a book out there that reminds people of the power of the Rosary, the major heroes and champions of it, the battles that it's won, all the countries that it's saved from ideological dictators and, you know, communism and you name it. And I was like, and I better be the one to do it before somebody attempts it and messes it up, you know, and does it poorly. So let's do this. So I spent 3 years of my life researching and writing this book in libraries, convents all around the world, and put it together. And now, it's being translated into Polish and Italian right now. It's absolutely amazing.
That's awesome. And people can get that book by going to fathercalloway.com. Father sent me a bunch of booklets, how to pray the Rosary. I'm going to give those out. I just have a few left because I've already given out hundreds of them. How to pray the Rosary. It's about an 80-page booklet. It talks about, you know, how to pray a Rosary well, and how you can become a champion of the Rosary. You can get those by calling 877-526-2151. Father, I know that this is a big book. It's like, man, almost 500 pages long. People should get the book, but it's just a brief story of I know I read this book, but the history of the Rosary. I don't know if people understand how the Rosary ever came together. Can you kind of just share in a few minutes about how the Rosary, I mean, did they just come down from heaven? Or, I mean, how did this Rosary that we have today in 2017 come, and who was responsible for this?
Yeah, so, it's a good point. It's a good question, because a lot of people wonder about that. And so it specifically came into the world in the 13th century when Our Lady gave it to St. Dominic in France. But there's parts of it that were already in existence, but it wasn't put together until that moment when Our Lady gave it to him specifically as the way that we pray it today. But the parts of the Rosary, I mean, basically the Rosary is the Bible on a set of beads, you know, so... You pray the Hail Mary prayer, which comes right out of the New Testament. So you've got the words of the Archangel Gabriel when he comes to Our Lady and says, you know, Hail, full of grace, the Lord is with thee, you know, and then that other part where St. Elizabeth, Mary's relative, says, Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb. Well, that's the majority of the Hail Mary prayer right there. It comes right out of the New Testament. And so then you've got that. You've got the Our Father prayer, which comes from the lips of our Lord himself, you know, the Pater Noster, the Our Father prayer.
Yeah.
And then you've got the prayer beads, which, you know, from the very beginnings of the church, a lot of scholars, even St. Jerome, who translated the Bible for us, a lot of monks, they would pray using little pebbles or prayer beads to count their prayers. Sometimes they would be given a penance, like for confession, and they would use prayer beads to count their prayers. And so that was also already in existence, but it wasn't the Rosary. And then you had this other thing called the Marian Psalter, which was basically a devotional form of Our Lady. Since there are 150 psalms, well, some monks in like the 11th century said, well, let's have to honor the Virgin Mary. For those monks who can't read Latin and participate in the monastic liturgy of the hours, they can pray 150 Hail Marys. Well, in the 13th century, with St. Dominic, Our Lady came to him and she said, "Preach my Psalter." And she gave him specific mysteries of the life of Jesus to preach and to pray about when he was out in the street trying to win back these heretics who were teaching falsehoods. And when she did that, she gave him the exact mysteries that they were attacking. And so that is the origin of it. And the date mostly associated with it, when that happened, was the year 1208. So we're talking a little over 800 years ago when the Rosary was given to the world.
Wow. Father Don, after the break, I want to ask you this question. In your book, you put, "A rosary a day keeps the devil away." Let's talk about how the rosary and part of spiritual warfare comes together. So you're listening to the Terry and Jesse Show. My good friend Father Don Calloway is here sharing his book called The Champions of the Rosary. And if you want to get a copy, go to his website, fathercalloway.com. You have to spell out Father. No, just abbreviate it. fathercalloway.com. Or you want to get his How to Pray the Rosary booklets. Got two of those for you. Just call 877-526-2151. I also have Mother of Mercy for you. It's a 3 CD set by him. He talks so beautiful about Our Lady. Call us at 877-526-2151. You don't want to miss what Father has to say about a rosary a day, keeping the devil away. We'll be right back.
For today's giveaway, call 877-526-2151. Back to the Terry and Jesse Show on Immaculate Heart Radio. Want to join the conversation? Call 888-914-9149. Here's Terry and Jesse.
This is Terry Barber. Jesse Romero's out of town today. He'll be back tomorrow with me. I've got my good friend Father Donald Calloway, and we're discussing his book, Champions of the Rosary. And I teased you at the end of this last segment about Father saying that a rosary a day keeps the devil away. Father Don, are we in a battle, or are we in a battle, and how does the rosary help us fight the devil?
Yeah, we are in a battle, and it's
I hear you, brother.
by the hour. It's
Amen.
And I think that it's important for people to know, the sad thing today, Terry, is that a lot of people, no longer believe in dragons. They say, well, Komodo dragons in Indonesia. And I'm like, well, yeah, those are the ones you can see, But
yeah, I know.
We're not talking about a Komodo dragon. We're talking about the dragon in the scriptures. In the Bible, Lucifer, Satan, the devil, is referred to as a dragon, okay? And that dragon is often depicted in the scriptures having 7 heads, and they're deadly heads. And that represents like the 7, vices, the 7 deadly sins. And, if people knew that, they might wake up and go, "Oh my goodness, I didn't realize this was going on." Well, once you realize that, then the question should be, well, how do I beat this dragon? How do I overcome a 7-headed dragon?
Right.
Well, everybody knows that nobody slays a dragon without a sword. You know what I mean? Everybody knows this. This is in all the movies and all the songs. And this is, in fact, what Jesus came to give to us. The sword is the sacred mysteries of his life, death, and resurrection, the teachings and sacraments of the Catholic Church. That's the sword that overcomes the evil one. Well, our God is so good to us that 800 years ago, having established the Catholic Church, it's been going on for, 1,200 years at that point. He even gives us another blessing and giving us a literal weapon to hold in our hands that kind of symbolizes that sword, and that's the rosary. And so a rosary a day keeps the devil away because you cut his head off, and that's why we need the rosary. It's a weapon for us to beat darkness.
Father, isn't there a story that you heard, or I heard about it, about a bishop in Africa having kind of a revelation about this rosary and a sword and fighting Boko Haram? I mean, I've heard about it. Do you know the story I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah, and I know the bishop. He's a great guy.
Tell us about
Bishop
it, brother.
Oliver Dome. He was one of the bishops I got to endorse my book. And So this is the thing. Is, a lot of people, they say, oh, Father, your imagery of the rosary as a sword, that's pretty violent. That's really militaristic. I'm like, well, I know it is. I love it. But, I tell them, I say, look, don't take my word for it. Unless you think, oh, that's just Father Calloway, Well, take the words of Jesus. So, for example, in December of 2014, and anyone who doubts this, they can go on YouTube and watch the videos of the bishop himself telling the story. So in December of 2014 in Nigeria, in a place that's plagued with Boko Haram, the militant Islamic group that's decapitating people, burning people, kidnapping little girls, well, this bishop was just at wit's end. He's like, I don't know what to do. My people are being massacred. So he went to prayer before the Blessed Sacrament, praying his rosary. Then all of a sudden, Jesus appeared to him. Jesus appeared to his bishop, and guess what Jesus had in his hands?
Tell me.
A sword. Now, this is amazing. So Jesus has in his hands a sword, and he doesn't say anything to the bishop. He just holds out the sword in a gesture of like wanting the bishop to take it. So the bishop reaches out to take the sword. As soon as he touches it, the sword becomes a rosary. And then Jesus speaks to him 3 times, and he says to his bishop 3 times, Boko Haram is gone. Boko Haram is gone. Boko Haram is gone. The bishop says, and you can watch the YouTube videos, he didn't need anybody to interpret the message for him. He said, Jesus was telling me that the rosary is a sword. It's a spiritual weapon. And he immediately began prayer campaigns in his diocese. Now, that was December of 2014. In 2016, the president of Nigeria himself went on national television in Nigeria and said that Boko Haram had been suffering great defeats, that they were almost on the point of being wiped out. Well, just a few months ago, 700 more Boko Haram surrendered their weapons because this bishop has been doing a rosary campaign in Nigeria, and Boko Haram is just slowly going away because Jesus said Boko Haram is gone, and the rosary is the way to get rid of evil.
That's a powerful story, Father. Can I ask you this, because the rosary is so powerful? This is the 100th anniversary of Our Lady of Fatima, and I know you were in Fatima recently, and the part of the peace plan of Our Lady of Fatima is the daily rosary. Can you just share a little bit why the rosary is part of Our Lady of Fatima's peace plan and encourage us all to pray that daily rosary? What was Our Lady's message regarding the rosary?
Yeah, I mean, the rosary is really at the core of Fatima. And, when you think about it, when she came, every time she came, she told the children to pray the rosary, and she told them specifically for an end to the war. And at that time, it was World War I. And so, the rosary, she's telling us that the rosary can stop wars. The rosary can change history. And
Amen.
That's important for us to know, because we've got things today that we need to stop, like abortion, like so-called, same-sex marriage. These are things we've got to put an end to. And the rosary is, to be used for that. And also, it's really important to remember this, that on the last apparition, on October 13th of 1917, she told the world her name, and she said that she was the Lady of the Rosary. Now, that's really important because, when you give someone your name, you're giving them a certain power over you. So, you just don't go out throwing your name on the street. Hello, my name is so-and-so. It's when you have a relationship with someone, you give them that ability to call upon you, that every time that they invoke your name, you're going to turn your head. Just like if you were walking down the street and you didn't know I was behind you and I said, hey, Terry, you're going to turn around. Because that calling out your name has a certain power to it. You're going to turn around and you're going to pay attention to me. Well, it's the same thing with Our Lady. She's our mother. She loves us. But when she gives us a specific name, when we call upon her using that name, her eyes are focused upon it. She's like, what, my child? What is it you're asking? And that's when we ask for an end to war, an end to abortion, an end to this nonsense that's going on in the world today. And that's part of the Fatima message. Is to implore heaven for a return of the good, the true, and the beautiful in our messed up world.
Father Don Calloway's book is called Champions of the Rosary. You go to fathercalloway.com and spell out Father, and you'll get that book, and it'll inspire you to pray the Rosary every single day. And if you want his booklet, How to Pray the Rosary, it's a 70-page booklet. I'm giving that away, 2 copies of it. You just call 877-526-2151. You can also get his conversion story called No Turning Back on DVD or CD. Or you can get his Mother of Mercy set, Mary is Key to the Restoration, as 3 CDs. 877-526-2151. Father, there's so much in this book about the Rosary, but I didn't want to let you go. I wanted to make sure you talk a little bit about Our Lady of Lourdes, because that chapter in your book is outstanding. And for those who have not heard about Our Lady of Lourdes, can you tell us how powerful the Rosary was in that apparition also?
Oh, absolutely. I love Lourdes.
Good.
I've been there.
So do I.
I think I've been there 4 times. And
Wow.
I'm actually going again next year. I do these pilgrimages and every
Good.
year, and I'm going to Lourdes again. I'm going all over France, and I love it because, not a lot of people realize this. Next year is the 160th anniversary of Lourdes, because it happened in 1858, and it's going to be 2018, so 160 years of Lourdes. And I love Lourdes because, there was so much crazy stuff going on in the time, right before the Lourdes apparition, that there was a lot of persecution going on, in the church. And Our Lady came to the same country where the Rosary had been given to the world, to France, and she came to this little girl named Bernadette Soubirous. And when Mary came, she came with the Rosary, and she even prayed parts of the Rosary with Saint Bernadette. So
how'd you like
Our
that?
Lady would pray. I know, right? I mean, just imagine that. To hear Our Lady say the Glory Be prayer. I mean, I would die of joy, to hear that. And so she had that Rosary, and, after the Lourdes apparition, it became every Catholic around the world, one of the greatest possessions that they could have would be a prayer card of Our Lady of Lourdes or a statue of Our Lady of Lourdes, and it became so popular that, there was even a very famous Jewish man who wrote a book about Lourdes, the Song of Bernadette, and then that book became a movie, and so many people have read that book or seen that movie especially, and they don't even realize that it was done by a Jewish man, because he was so in awe of what happened at Lourdes to little Bernadette Soubirous and the promotion of the Rosary that he did that. And so I love that place. And I definitely want to encourage people. I mean, if they've never gone on a pilgrimage, go to my website, check that one out, because next year, me and my mom, and we'll take as many people as can go, are going there. And that place, I tell you, you want to pray, that place is like, it's like a princess fairy tale. It's like a castle. It's so beautiful. It's just,
it's true.
It blows me away. Every time I get there, I'm in tears,
Father, I just left Lourdes about 8 weeks ago. I know exactly what you're saying. If you want to get to that pilgrimage, go to FatherCalloway.com. When we come back from the break, I want to talk about some great saints who are promoting the Rosary, like St. Louis de Montfort, St. Maximilian Kolbe. So you won't want to miss what Father has to say about those 2 great saints. If you'd like to pick up some CDs of Father Calloway, of his conversion story, No Turning Back, DVD or CD, or the Gospel Without Compromise, or the Mother of Mercy CDs, they're there. You just call 877-526-2151. More in a moment with Father Don Calloway.
For today's giveaway, call 877-526-2151. You're listening to The Terry and Jesse Show on Immaculate Heart Radio. To join the show, call 888-914-9149. Here's Terry and Jesse.
It's Terry Barber. Jesse's out of town. I've got my good friend Father Don Calloway here. We're glad you came to join us. Get yourself a cup of coffee or tea, because we're talking about Our Lady of the Rosary. We're talking about a great book, Champions of the Rosary, that Father Don Calloway wrote. You go to FatherCalloway.com to get his book. But I teased you at the end of the last segment that I want him to talk about some saints who are big promoters of the Rosary, and one of them is St. Louis de Montfort. So, Father Don, tell us about St. Louis de Montfort and his devotion to Mary.
This guy is probably one of the greatest Marian saints of all time. I mean, he was living during the 18th century, and he was ordained a priest in 1700, and there was a lot of really bad things going on during his time that he lived, and so he went on a preaching campaign to try and win people back, and they weren't listening to him, and so he ended up writing these phenomenal books on the Blessed Virgin Mary: True Devotion to the Blessed Virgin, The Secret of the Rosary, The Secret of Mary. But, he was ridiculed, even by his brother priest. I mean, how horrible is that, and yeah, so his books were buried in a field in France, and they were buried there for like over 130 years. Nobody even knew they existed. They weren't even printed during his lifetime because people just laughed at him. They were like, what? Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, but this guy was so phenomenal that he wrote some of the greatest books about the Blessed Virgin Mary ever. He's now a saint, and I pray one day he becomes a doctor of the church. I mean, that guy is just in a league of his own. And he was so in love with the Rosary that, I mean, he would go through the streets, and he would go to like a street corner or a square, back then the main for those towns, and he would just start preaching about the Rosary, man. And people would be like, what is going on here? And he would just start telling the truths of Christianity, the mysteries of Christ, and he just was unbelievable. And you talk about slaying dragons. That guy slew some dragons,
That's amazing. And Father, that book called True Devotion to Mary, isn't that the book that prepares people for consecration? You would say that's one of his gems, would you not? Or to me, that's a fruit of his hard work.
For sure. I mean, that's the foundation, really. I mean, he's just incredible. I mean, that guy, if anybody who's never read anything by him, they need to go out and get a book by him immediately. Just incredible stuff.
Well, he is. And I want to ask one more. I got two more people I want to ask you about in your book. You cover these well. St. Maximilian Kolbe, he also was very Marian, similar to St. Louis de Montfort, but I think he even took Louis de Montfort's material and added some more things about Our Lady. And I'd like to ask you to share a little bit about who St. Maximilian Kolbe was and why he had such a great love for Our Lady and the Rosary.
Yeah, he was phenomenal. I mean, he was, really in modern times. I mean, just 100 years ago, less than 100 years ago, a Polish priest, a Franciscan, and, many people might be familiar with his story that, he was captured and he was taken to Auschwitz, to the concentration camp, and he volunteered his life. When another man was going to die, he stepped up and took his place and just baffled everyone. Why would somebody do that? But because he was a martyr of love. And, but he was, so in love with Our Lady that he wanted to found these cities of the Immaculate all over the world. And he went to Japan and he, started a magazine about Our Lady. And at one point in Poland, before he was, taken to Auschwitz, he actually had like a monastery that had like 900 friars in it. That's how big it was. It was amazing. The largest monastery in the world at that time. And he started the Militia Immaculata in the same year, by the way, that the Fatima apparitions happened in 1917, because these Freemasons were attacking the church and the Pope. And so he founded this like Marian militia, to conquer the enemy and to slay that dragon. And he specifically told the members of the Militia Immaculata that they were to use the Rosary as a sword. He told them specifically that it was a sword. So this guy, I call him the Knight of the Rosary, he's awesome.
Father, I have to tell you, I went to St. Maximilian Kolbe's canonization, and I met Gajowniczek, the man he died for, here in California when he came to visit. And you get to hold my little baby, and I mean, I'm stoked about St. Max. Matter of fact, I'm consecrated because of the St. Maximilian Kolbe, and so I had to ask you about him. There's two people that I still think are just outstanding. Frank Sheed, maybe you don't know that name, but I'm sure people would know about the Legion of Mary. Can you tell us a little bit about Frank Sheed? Because you cover that in your book on Champions of the Rosary. Please tell us about Frank.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's Frank Duff is the name.
Frank Sheed. I'm sorry. Frank, I got him mixed up. Yeah. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Frank Duff.
Sorry. No, yeah, this guy's phenomenal. And what I love about this guy is that, because a lot of people sometimes they think, well, I can never be like them because they're priests, they're nuns. I'm like, well, hold on, wait a minute, because this guy, Frank Duff, was just a layman from Ireland. And if you look at his pictures, he looks like everybody's grandpa. He doesn't stand out like anything special. He just looks like grandpa. And this guy was so in love with the Rosary that he founded in 1921 the Legion of Mary. Okay, now most people probably in the 40s and 50s were familiar with the Legion of Mary because every diocese and almost every Catholic parish in the world had a Legion of Mary in it. And so basically, it's living out that Marian consecration of St. Louis de Montfort, praying the Rosary with the group and doing works of service, helping out in soup kitchens or, those kind of things and helping the poor. And at one point, the leader of communist China, during the time of when Frank Duff was spreading the Legion of Mary all around the world, the leader of communist China said that the Legion of Mary was public enemy number one. That's
amazing.
How fearful the communists were of the Legion of Mary because, then that word, Legion of Mary, the word legion comes from the Roman understanding of a military unit. So you've got a legion here, a legion there, and they're protecting, the forces and the castle, so to speak. And so he formed this organization to be a Marian army that was out there promoting Our Lady, conquering the evil one, and specifically through the means of consecration and the Rosary. And this is just an ordinary layman. Frank Duff from Ireland, from middle of nowhere in Ireland, is raised up to do this. So this just goes to show you don't have to be a priest, you don't have to be a nun. Right. You can be, a layman and do incredible things for Jesus and Mary.
Well said. Before we go to the break, when we come back, I'm going to have you talk about an amazing man. His name is Blessed Bartolo Longo, and how the Rosary helped him get out of being in the demonic. What? Yes, a Satanist. You're not gonna want to miss this story because it's amazing, and it's in his book called Champions of the Rosary. You go to FatherCalloway.com, and you have to spell out Father. Don't put the abbreviation. You won't get there if you do that. I'm giving away some material of Father Calloway, How to Pray the Rosary. It's a booklet about 75 pages long, 2 copies. I'm giving them out. You just pay the shipping and the handling by calling 877-526-2151. Also, I'm giving this set. This is the Gospel Without Compromise. Do you like the way Father preaches? I have 3 talks of his on his powerful preaching, the Gospel Without Compromise. You might want to get that. Or Mother of Mercy, Mary's Key to the Restoration. That's 3 CDs. Or No Turning Back. Also, I want to remind you, we have this Spiritual Warfare Conference coming up January 13th called Angels and Demons. Father William Wagner from the Opus Angelorum. This is the priest who teaches the exorcists. What's he teaching them? About angels and demons, especially about the angels. And so I'm flying him into California. We're going to have a packed house here at the Sacred Heart Chapel. If you want to join us for that event, January 13th, call 877-526-2151. Before we go to the break, remember, after the break, I'm going to have Father talk about Blessed Bartolo Longo and how he was into the occult. He was a Satanist, and it was the Rosary. Well, I'm not going to tell the story. I'm going to let Father tell it. Father, before we go to the break, if there's a young man listening to you speaking right now, and they think maybe God's calling them to the priesthood, how can they contact you? Should they just go to your website, Calloway.com, or because you do vocation weekends with young men? Is that a fair statement still?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, go to my website, contact me. I'm the vocation director. We've got 35 seminarians right now who are on fire, good men who want to be saints, love Our Lady. So we're looking for more good men. We want good guys and to build up this Marian army for Our Lady. Yeah, go to my website. It's got the link there. You can send me an email. We'll get in touch, and we'll discern it together. Absolutely.
Well, that's great. Father, I'm just going to let you say a little bit because we have to break in 2 minutes. I want people to come back after the break to hear the rest of the story because this Blessed Bartolo Longo is in your book, and you gave such a great description of this man and how the Rosary is what got him out of being a Satanist. But can you at least start the story, and then I'll have to interrupt you, and people will have to listen to the rest of the story after the break. But who was this man, and when did he live, and how did Our Lady touch him?
Yeah, so I'll just introduce it. This guy was just a little over 100 years ago in Naples, Italy. Grew up a Catholic, of course, in Italy, but then he fell away from the faith when he went off to college, which is so sad. It happens so often,
All the time.
And but he was still searching, and he went and he started going to these seances, and he got involved in the occult, and he thought that he had found meaning, and he got totally suckered into this and duped into it. And then, after a period of time, in his own words, now not mine, He became an ordained satanic priest. That's how bad he was, okay?
Sick.
But after the break, I'm going to tell you about how he came out of that, and now he's a blessed of the church. You're not going to believe it. It's amazing.
Oh, it is. You won't want to miss this story. I think it's one of the most amazing stories. And think about how active Satanism is in today's church. If you have a son or daughter, you're going to want to hear this. So when we come back, and we're going to take Anna's call and a couple other calls that are calling in about the Rosary. I've been interviewing Father Don Calloway. He wrote a book called Champions of the Rosary. Go to fathercalloway.com to get a copy. If you want to get some free booklets on how to pray the Rosary, I've got 2 of them to give to you. You just call 877-526-2151. When we come back, Father Calloway is going to tell us the rest of the story about Blessed Bartolo Longo and how Our Lady pulled him out of being a Satanist. You won't want to miss that. We'll be back in a moment.
Sewn together like a hand in glove, like pages in a letter. Ain't no woman like the one I love.
Views expressed on the Terry and Jesse Show are for educational purposes only. Now here's Terry and Jesse.
Actually, it's Terry Barber with Father Don Calloway. Jesse's out of town. He'll be back tomorrow. By the way, we're going to do 3 hours of programming to help Patrick Madrid out tomorrow at 6 to 9. And I've got a priest who's coming on at 7. Believe it or not, his one parish has saved over 1,100 babies from abortion. And I'm going to tell you what he's doing so we can multiply this all over the country. Father Don Calloway was telling us about Blessed Bartolo Longo and his story, how he was into the occult. He was a Satanist. Father, continue to tell us how Our Lady reached him. I'm on the edge of my chair.
Yeah, well, what happened was he got ordained and literally was an ordained satanic priest, going to seances, performing seances, and all that stuff. And the fruit of that, after he'd been doing that for some time, he got major depression. I mean, he was like suffering from anxiety. He couldn't sleep. He was having hallucinations, and he was a wreck. And to the point where he literally was thinking about taking his own life. He was thinking about committing suicide. That's how bad it got. Because that's always the fruit of the occult. It doesn't lead to good. It leads to depression, anxiety, and you just are messed up. So, he knew about Catholicism because he had been a Catholic when he was a young boy. Well, he humbled himself, and he went and found a Catholic priest. And this priest that he found was a Dominican priest, and this Dominican, a good Dominican, told him about the Rosary, about the power of the Rosary, and how it's like a chain that can, it binds you to the Blessed Virgin Mary and leads you to Jesus. And so he couldn't move fast enough to embrace what that priest was saying. He actually burst into a seance after he talked to that priest, and he told the people in this seance to repent, and he held up a rosary, and they told him that this is what you're looking for, and they ridiculed him, they mocked him, they kicked him out. But he had a huge conversion. He renounced the occult. He ended up becoming a third-order Dominican. He went to the old destroyed city of Pompeii and rebuilt the city, built a new basilica, started orphanages, all these places for charitable organizations, and now, check this out, the former satanic priest is now Blessed Bartolo Longo. He was beatified in 1980 by St. John Paul II and is on his way to being a saint in the church. And this is powerful because I know so many people, I meet so many parents that say, Father, my son is involved in the occult. He's doing stuff with the Ouija board, or he's so into witches and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, look, there's a patron for this. His name is Blessed Bartolo Longo. You've got to do what he did. You've got to pray the Rosary. You've got to ask for his intercession, and tell people about this man's story because it's powerful and it's real. And I mean, it's so mind blowing because you can't get much worse than this guy was. You know what I mean? I mean, this dude was worshiping the devil, and through the Rosary, now he is someone that we asked to intercede for us before, the Holy Trinity. So that's powerful stuff, man.
It is, and it's in your book, Champions of Rosary, and many more heroes and spiritual material in this book called The Champions of the Rosary. You go to fathercalloway.com to get that book. We have Anna who had a question. She's been waiting online very patiently. Anna, welcome to the Terry and Jesse Show. You're on with Father Don Calloway. What is your question or comment? Go ahead, Anna.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call, Terry.
Our pleasure.
Terry, I was talking with somebody about the Blessed Mother this morning, and they hit me with a question that I just there in the headlight. I don't know if it went to a mental block or what. But Mary was born Immaculate Conception.
Yes.
Immaculate. She was born without original sin. And they asked me, well, how can that be if her parents were born in original sin?
Great question, Father Don. Why don't you handle that one? Talk about how she was pre-redeemed.
Sure.
I'm all ears. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, well, it's a privilege. So it's by God's design. She was freed from that. Now Mary is redeemed, just like you and I are, but in a more perfect way. So the saints and the popes for centuries have said that there's two ways that we can be redeemed. Once we've fallen into the pit of sin, which means we're born into sin, like you and me, and everybody else, we are drawn out of that pit by Jesus Christ. He redeems us in that way. Well, God wanted to establish Mary as the new Eve, the mother of all the living, and so he gave her a special gift in her Immaculate Conception that she never fell into the pit. But see, he still saved her from the pit. It's just she didn't fall into it. That's preventing it. That's like being pre-redeemed. And he can do that. And I'll give you another example of how God, he doesn't need to work in time, and he doesn't need to, do things the way that we do. For example, at the Last Supper, there's Jesus with his disciples, and they're sitting right in front of him, and he holds out to them bread and wine, and he says to them, "Take and eat, this is my body." Now, how can he do that? He's sitting there right in front of them. How can he give them his body and blood to eat when he's sitting right there in front of them? Because he's God. He's able to, before things are even established, he hadn't even died on the cross yet, and he's already given them at the Last Supper his body and blood to eat. That's amazing. He's God. He doesn't need to work within our time frame. He can do things in a prevenient way. He can give them the Eucharist before it's even been consummated on the cross. So he can give to humanity our new spiritual mother, free from original sin, because a mother can't give what a mother doesn't have. See, a mother imparts to her children that which she has. Your mother and my mother gave us human nature because we get it from her. Well, Mary, our spiritual mother, the new Eve, in the order of grace, our mother in the order of grace, is going to be the one in the life of the church that helps us to grow in grace and to come to the full maturity in Jesus Christ. And it's that gift of being immaculate, free from sin herself, that allows her to fulfill that role. It's a gift that Jesus gave to her in light of her role as the new Eve. And what a gift it is, and what a blessing we are to be her spiritual children.
Amen. Anna, did that help you?
Yeah, it did. The only thing I could answer at the time was that since Jesus was God, God-man, then he could not be born with sin or someone of sin.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, I think that Father Calloway's explanation is outstanding. And, what you can do, too, is look that up in the Catechism of the Catholic Church, because that is covered in the Catechism. So, Anna, I thank you for taking the time to call Father Calloway, and I would encourage you to pick up his book, Champions of the Rosary, by going to fathercalloway.com, and I thank you for your call. God bless you, Anna. We're at the end of the time, but I can't let Father Calloway not talking about the Rosary without talking about one of my favorite men, and I hope his cause is up for canonization. He's a servant of God. I hope to be soon blessed. His name is Archbishop Fulton J. Sheen. I say full Sheen ahead on the radio because of my love for Fulton Sheen. Father Calloway, you have a section in your book on Champions of the Rosary. Wouldn't you consider Bishop Sheen a champion of the Rosary?
Absolutely. This guy was in love with the Rosary. I mean, he actually came up with his own kind of rosary, so it's a regular rosary, but he was in charge at one point during his life when he was a bishop of like the propagation of the faith, like in a worldly sense. So he of promoting the faith in different continents. That was his role. He was the national director for the Society of the Propagation of the Faith. And so when he was in that role, he came up with what he called the World Mission Rosary. So I don't know if the listeners have ever seen a rosary where each decade is a different color. So you've got like a green one, you've got a red one, a yellow one. Mm-hmm. So he is the originator of that kind of rosary. And he said when you pray that particular decade, it's intended to pray for a specific geographical region of the planet. So he divided them up into 5 for the 5 decades. So and it's a brilliant. I mean, and here's what it is. So green stands for Africa because the blue, because of the lushness of Africa. Blue is for the Pacific region and Oceania. White is for Europe. Red is for the Americas. Yellow is for Asia. And so it's just a brilliant way of praying for the entire world when you pray a rosary, because Fulton Sheen was so in love with Our Lady. He went to Lourdes like so many times. It's crazy. You know, he practically lived in Lourdes. He went there so much. And he was just so in love with Our Lady that I agree with you, brother. That guy needs to be beatified and canonized like yesterday. You know what I mean? I mean, we're going at snail's pace on this, and we need to, stop with all the politics behind this and get this guy raised to the honors of the altar because he's awesome.
Well, I always tell people I'm not in management, I'm in sales, so I'm going to keep praying, and I ask everybody else to pray for Fulton Sheen's cause for his canonization. Father Don, we only have a couple minutes left. I want people to get your book, and they can go to fathercalloway.com. Also, Father Don, if they want to go on pilgrimages, you're going to Lourdes and different places. Can they get that information on your website?
Yeah, if they go to the website, it's got a pilgrimage link. I've got like 5 of them coming up for next year. I mean, we've got Lourdes, I've got the Holy Land, I've got, I'm going to, also to Mexico, to Guadalupe, I'm going to Poland. Oh, I love Poland. I try and go there almost every year. That's a phenomenal place. So check those out on my website. Love to have people come along.
All right, Father Don Calloway, got to thank you again for joining the Terry and Jesse show. May God richly bless you. Again, Father has a website called fathercalloway.com. Father, could you give us a priestly blessing before we close our program, please? All our listeners.
Absolutely. Heavenly Father, we ask you to bless all the listeners, and especially their intentions, and for any broken hearts, for any wounds in families, for healings of marriages, for children to come back to the practice of the sacraments, to have a conversion, especially through the intercession of Our Lady and St. Joseph. And we ask this blessing in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Father Don Calloway, thank you for being our guest here at the Terry and Jesse show. May God richly bless you and your community. God love you, brother. Thanks, Father.
You too.
Folks, I want to mention, if you want to get a copy of his No Turning Back, through Lighthouse, I had distributed thousands of these, but I also have the DVD, No Turning Back, Confessions of a Catholic Priest. You look at the picture of it on the back of the DVD and say, that was a Father Calloway? Whoa. Get a copy by calling 877-526-2151, or you can pick up his CD, Mother of Mercy set. Mary's the Key to Restoration. You want to hear a power preacher, Father Calloway? The Gospel Without Compromise. You can get them all by calling 877-526-2151. Don't forget, tomorrow morning we'll have a priest on for the Patrick Madrid show that saved over 1,100 babies at his parish, and he's going to tell us how he did it. May God richly bless you, and we'll see you again tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. We're filling in for Patrick Madrid. Full sheen ahead. God love you.
For today's giveaway, call 877-526-2151.